Lock in the strategy, let them execute. Do not change the rules of the game in the middle of the quarter just because you're feeling anxious.
Welcome back to the Fitz and Franson Show. I'm Fitz.
Yep. And I'm Franson.
This is a show where we talk about leadership, business, growth, sales, marketing, and what it actually takes to build something that lasts without lying to yourself along the way.
Yeah. And if you guys haven't figured it out by now, we're definitely not here for the hype, but we are here for clarity because, in business, chaos can be normal, but staying there is definitely a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you listen to last week's episode, we left you with a little bit of a cliffhanger. We told you that today we're going to talk about one thing that is quietly destroying your sales team's confidence, and you're probably doing it without even really knowing it. It's a leadership blind spot that we see in almost every growing company.
Yeah. And this is a fun one. I love psychology. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the psychology of performance today. We're going to pull from some of the best minds out there in behavioral science and sales. People you guys have heard of like Chase Hughes, Daniel Kahneman, Alex Hormozi, Grant Cardone. And we're going to do this to show you exactly how confidence is built. And more importantly, how quickly it can be destroyed. But before we get into that, let's kick things off with our daily inspirations rundown.
That's right. Yeah. So our team tracks the biggest conversations happening across the business world right now today. And this week, that data is pretty loud. It's clear across, the platforms like LinkedIn and Reddit. There's this massive conversation happening about burnout and morale. It's not the kind of burnout that comes from working too many hours. It's really kind of the burnout that comes from a lack of maybe that psychological safety.
There's a lot of businesses out there where the employees aren't exhausted by the work itself, but they are kind of exhausted by the unpredictability of maybe the industry or their leadership. And when those things, when leadership is unpredictable, that can really hit confidence pretty hard.
No doubt. So let's get right into the hot take for today, Jay. So the conventional wisdom in sales management is that you have to hold people's feet to the fire. You have to use the scoreboard to drive that competition. And you have to call out those low performers so they step their game up, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, my hot take is that if you manage your team with fear, public humiliation, or constant pressure, you're not managing a modern sales team. You're managing an assembly line from like 1910. And you're actively destroying your own revenue.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. There's I might butcher her name, but it's Amy Edmondson I think it was from Harvard Business School, actually studied this. She found that it was fear-based management was perfected on the Ford assembly line, like you mentioned, and that was over a century ago. And look, you're probably not surprised to find out that it worked brilliantly for that kind of mindless, repetitive task type work. If you just need someone to, I think maybe in those instances, turn a wrench faster, fear really works in that instance.
The industry that we're in, this home improvement space, no aspect of the business is a mindless task. Event marketing is not a mindless task. Installation and field service, they're not mindless tasks. These roles require high levels of creativity, empathy, curiosity, ability to solve complex problems. And the behavioral science is really undisputed at this point. It makes the human brain less creative, less empathetic, and more prone to mistakes.
Yeah. I know we've talked about him before, and I think you and I have kind of more recently discovered him, and some of his stuff is really fascinating. But Chase Hughes, who is one of the top behavioral analysts in the world at the moment, talks about this, I think, constantly as we're finding out. He says that confidence is not about confidence. It's about the certainty of an outcome, right? And I think when a leader creates an unpredictable environment where like a sales rep doesn't know if they're going to be praised or humiliated on any given day, the brain switches from a creative state to that survival state. And you can't close a deal or connect with a customer when you're in a survival mode.
For sure. And also I'd like to push back a little bit on this, Fitz, because there is a difference between fear-based management and high accountability. Grant Cardone talks about this. He says confidence is a muscle. And if you don't drill it, if you don't role play, if you don't hold people to a high standard, that muscle can atrophy. So how do you hold a team accountable without destroying their confidence?
Look, I think drilling and role play is important. You've heard me say that a bunch, but I think it comes down to a really key part of this, right? It comes down to objective feedback versus subjective feedback. I think another, good voice out there is Alex Hormozy, and I think he broke this down pretty brilliantly. If you pull a rep into your office and say, you were terrible on the phones today and you need to get your energy up, that's subjective. It attacks their identity, it destroys their confidence. But if you just kind of flip it a little bit, right, and you say, hey, your close rate dropped by, from, let's say, from 40% to 25% this week. So let's go back and take a look at the tape or listen to the recordings and figure out what changed in like your price roll, your price presentation. That's objective, and that attacks like a real problem and not really the person or their energy, so to speak. That's a big difference.
Oh, that's it. That's a massive distinction between the two. And I think that we as leaders can, say things maybe in the moment that we do accidentally attack the person instead of the problem in front of us. So in this way, you're giving them the evidence they need to rebuild their confidence rather than just tearing down their self-worth. Hormozy also says, if you don't have confidence, build evidence. I love that. I mean, be able to point out to your more hesitant employees the evidence that says that they have what it takes to be winners. So leaders have to help their teams build that evidence.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So let's break this down into like I guess the specific ecosystems where this happens inside of our business, because confidence does get destroyed differently depending on, I think, the role, inside of the organizations we work with. So let's start, Jay, with one that you're probably familiar with, the call centers, right? I think this is an environment that's really notorious for high turnover and low morale. What would you say is the number one leadership blind spot in a call center?
Yeah. Oh, this one. Yeah. Micromanagement. And I'll tell you why. Without a doubt, call center managers have access to more data than any other leaders in the business. They can see average handle time, conversion rates, wrap up time. A lot of the call centers, the programs you use records every call, and you can pull up dashboards with everything. And so what happens is that the managers, they just start managing the metrics instead of coaching the behavior.
Yeah, that's spot on. Yeah, I think they end up becoming, kind of that like dashboard manager, right? They sit in their office and they watch the numbers. They turn from red to green and back and forth, and they run out onto the floor and they yell at whoever is red at that moment.
And then just extrapolate and think about what that does to the rep's psychology. Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize winning psychologist who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, talks about a concept called loss aversion. And this is where humans feel the pain of a loss twice as intensely as the pleasure of a gain. So when a call center manager only points out what a rep is doing wrong, only focuses on the mistakes, they are constantly triggering that loss aversion. The rep becomes paralyzed, maybe not paralyzed, but slower, and they become so afraid of making a mistake that they stop taking the risks. They second guess themselves. They could even stop sounding human. And then they just end up reading a script like a robot.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because look, and when they sound like a robot, their conversation rate will end up dropping even further. And that brings that manager back out on the floor to start yelling at them all over again. It turns into kind of that death spiral, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you fix it? To be honest, you have to give them autonomy within the framework. You have to celebrate the small wins. If a rep handles a brutal objection perfectly, but still loses the deal, you have to celebrate the behavior. You have to reward the execution of the process, not just the final outcome.
Sure. All right. So we talk a little bit about call center. Let's pivot to maybe a second ecosystem here, the events marketer or trade show booth staff, right? It's a completely different animal. These people are standing on their feet for 10 hours a day on hard concrete, getting just flat out rejected straight to their face hundreds of times. Their confidence is under like a constant assault, like directly from the public. How does leadership maybe unknowingly make it worse for these people?
Yeah, they are a special breed of people. Oftentimes, leadership unknowingly sends them into a battle, because these home shows can be a battle without the clear mission that's needed. The number one confidence killer for an event marketer is really a lack of clear expectations. Leaders can spend thousands of dollars on the booth and on the entrance fee and all of the things required to get the team ready, and then they say, all right, go get some leads.
Yeah. Yeah, that's you and I have seen that a bunch of times, right? Well, nothing worked, and my team's not good at this. And at the end of the day, we'll shoot, the draft just happened. So use a football reference. It would be like the
Hmm.
equivalent of telling a football team go score points and not giving them any kind of playbook or plays to go run.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then when the event doesn't generate the ROI the company expected, leadership then blames the event staff. And they say the staff didn't hustle hard enough. But the reality is the leadership failed to provide the strategy from the beginning.
Sure. Yeah, I think you and I have both seen this happen probably too many times to count. And look, there's another probably massive, bigger blind spot here: leadership's inconsistency, right? A leader will tell the event team that the goal is to collect as many emails as possible or contact information as possible. And halfway through the
Mhm.
first day, the leader panics because the emails aren't turning into, instant appointments. So they change the goalposts. They move the goalpost, right? Now they want the
Yep.
team to hard close appointments right there on the floor. That's not a winning formula.
Yeah. Yeah. The team members get whiplash.
Mm.
They're like, hey, we're told to do this, and now we're told to do this. And yeah, exactly. And that right there throws the wrench in the system. It destroys the team's rhythm. You gave them a script and a flow. It was working for the first goal. Now they have to completely change their approach on the fly. That's tough.
Yeah, it destroys the evidence base that Hormozy was maybe that he talks about. The team they end up losing confidence in the system in general, and more importantly, they lose confidence in that leader, like you were just talking about. If you
Mhm.
want that event team, you want your event team to perform with an absolute certainty, have to lock in the strategy before the doors open, and you have to let them execute it without any kind of interference or that
Yeah.
whiplash, like you just mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are being hard on the leaders right now, but I think it's appropriate.
Mm.
So let's move on to the third ecosystem. And this is one that almost nobody talks about when it comes to confidence, the install crews or the field service workers.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably the most undervalued workforce in any service business, which is kind of crazy to say because it's what we're all like selling, right? The appointment and then the actual
Hmm.
sale itself. And their confidence
Hmm.
is just as critical, if not the most critical to an organization's bottom line as your top sales rep's confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm not a big fan of sales guys. We both know this fits, but man, those sales guys, they get all the glory.
Wow.
They get the attaboys and the high fives and the commission checks, but the install crew gets unrealistic timelines and angry customers when things don't go right. How does leadership destroy the confidence of those field workers or the installers?
Well, some of those pats on the back are well deserved by us salespeople, if I'm being honest here. But look, yeah. Well, look, I think the unfortunate thing is that the install crews and the production people, unfortunately, at times get treated like an afterthought, right? And the communication with them, they only get communicated with when there's a problem, right? When does the operation manager call the lead installer? Well, only when a job is maybe behind schedule or a customer's complained or I don't know, a piece of equipment shows up back at the shop broken, right? They
Yeah,
never get a
yeah,
call just to say, hey, that install yesterday was flawless, right? It's kind of like out of sight, out of mind when those things happen, or
yeah.
like the customer was thrilled or great work, right? We don't celebrate that stuff nearly as often as we should.
Hmm. Yeah. And this goes back to Kahneman's loss aversion. If the only feedback you ever receive is negative, your brain starts to associate your leadership as a threat. Stop caring about excellence and you start caring only about survival. And so, these installers, they just want to get the job done fast enough so they don't get yelled at.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, when an install crew shifts from, I think, caring about that excellence to caring about survival, the number one thing that you have that you bring to the table, your quality, it absolutely plummets. And your callbacks will end up skyrocketing. And those 5-star reviews that we're all desperately after, they
Hmm.
evaporate into thin air.
Yeah. One thing I do here at Powerful Media with my team, we do an all hands meeting every Tuesday, and it's very routine, very redundant. Review last week, talk about wins and losses. But two things we do every week, and we're deliberate about it, is we talk about customer praise. So here in the office, the account managers, they're talking to the customers and they find things that are going well, what the customer's happy about. But then we also jump into conversations that our team has had. Um, that went well. So it might be that they didn't actually book the appointment, but they handled a price objection really well. Or they, revived a conversation from 6 months ago and got that customer to book an appointment. And so it is important to just schedule regular praise. Just
Mhm.
make it a habit. It's easy enough. Most companies have the install meeting or the sales meeting. Make sure that's a line item in every single meeting that you have where you just point out something that went well. So, there's also an issue that we talked about last week with the disconnect between sales and operations. When a sales rep promises a customer that a job will take 2 days and the install crew knows it's a 4-day job, the crew is set up to fail before they even park the truck. And this can destroy their confidence in the company's integrity. Big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as a sales leader, I've had those conversations with sales reps
Mhm.
too often, right? We got to do better about how we
Yeah.
promise things or what we promise to
Mhm.
homeowners. Look, if you're a sales rep out there or a sales leader out there, you definitely need to hear this. If you want to bring
Mhm.
a high performing install crew down, which is a really, really great sales tool to have. If you want to bring them down and crush them, this is a great way to do it. On the flip side of it, if you want to bring them into the fold, you got to
Yeah.
celebrate their wins. You got to make sure you set them up for success, right? But celebrate them publicly. You have to ask for their input on timelines
Mhm.
and materials. And when they feel valued, their confidence goes up, right? And a
Yep.
confident install crew will generate more referral, repeat business than some of your best marketing campaigns. I've seen that time and time again.
And I think we've actually talked about it on this show, but whose name always shows up in the Google reviews? It's not the sales guy.
No, nor the marketers, for the record, Jay.
Correct.
Okay, just
We
for the
get
record.
zero credit. Usually marketers, they were annoying.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the sales guys weren't far off of
Mhm.
annoying either, if we're being honest. But
Yep.
no, it's always the crews,
Yeah.
right? So, again, I
Yeah.
think all of us are working to set each other up for success, and clearer
Mhm.
expectations is the right way to do it. And I think one of the big things is that open line of communication between all three pillars here is a
Yeah.
really really important part of this. But again, just making sure everybody's set up for success is huge, and not just kind of handing the ball off and making it somebody else's problem.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good episode, Fitz. I like it.
Mhm.
So let's make this a little bit more personal. Let's talk about some actionable takeaways for our listeners. If you're listening to this and you realize you might be unknowingly destroying one of your team's confidence, let's talk about 3 things that you probably need to change this week.
Yeah, I'm ready for it, man. Let's bring it home. What's step one?
All right. This one's good. It's an audit. Everyone likes a good audit, right?
Mhm.
Like a tax audit, good stuff.
Should I go get a tie?
Yeah. Step one, audit your feedback ratio. One of our jobs as leaders is to give feedback that's clear as kind. And so we want to be giving feedback to our team members so that they can improve. With that being said, over the next 5 days, or the 5 working days, track every piece of feedback you give your team, not what you receive, what you give. Are you giving objective feedback like we talked about earlier that's based on data? Or is it more subjective feedback based on emotion? Are you celebrating the behaviors that you want to see, or are you only pointing out the mistakes?
Hmm. Yeah, that's powerful, right? I think taking time to notate what you said and how you said it, that would be a big one, and where it
Mm,
came from would be huge. So, really good
yeah.
one, Jay. What's number two?
Yeah. So, step two, and business owners like to hustle and they like to pivot. They like new ideas, but stop moving the goalposts.
Mm.
Whether it's your call center, your event team, your sales floor, your installation crew, lock in the strategy and let them execute. Do not change the rules of the game in the middle of the quarter just because you're feeling anxious. Let them build the evidence that the system works.
That's huge. I think given time for a system to like breathe and grow a little
Hmm.
bit and find out if it actually is
Yeah.
working or not, I think we're all guilty of kind of like that anxiety of like, I need to see some momentum going. It's harder. It's easier said than done, rather. So, but that
Hmm.
consistency will breed some confidence in your people. There's no doubt, and they'll figure it
Yeah.
out. So let them do it.
Yep.
I like it, man.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
What's the final step, Jay?
Yeah. Step three, recognize your invisible workforce. This is an interesting one. I like this one. This really kind of highlights the team as a whole. Find one person on your install crew or somewhere else in the organization, administrative staff person, someone that did something exceptionally well this week, and recognize them publicly. Show the entire company that excellence matters, no matter what department it happens in.
I like that. Invisible workforce. I like it. So recognize the invisible workforce. So that's how you build a culture of like unshakable confidence. And I think when every single person in the building knows that their work like really matters and that their leadership has their back, man, that's unstoppable. You're an unstoppable force.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, Fitz. We covered some deep psychological territory here today. This is the invisible game of business. If you master this, the revenue typically takes care of itself.
Yeah, I think it really does. Look, if you thought today's episode was maybe eye-opening, wait until next week. We're going to talk about the one conversation that every business owner is probably a little terrified to have. And it's not with a difficult employee or maybe that angry customer that we all avoid till the end of the day. It's with themselves, unfortunately. So we're going to break down exactly why most business owners are the single biggest bottleneck in their own company and what they have to do to get out of their own way before it costs them everything. So that one is probably going to hit close to home for some of us, and you'll definitely not want to miss it.
I'm looking forward to that one. I have definitely had some ahas where I'm like, oh no, I'm the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good ahas.
Like, yeah, who am I going to blame? Oh, shoot, it's me.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you everybody for tuning in today. Today's episode was brought to you by jorts. They're comfortable and practical.
Nice.
Just kidding. All jokes aside, if today's show brought you value, please share it with another business owner who needs to hear it. And like, subscribe, leave us a review. Check out some of our other shows that have already been posted to the channels.
Yeah, we appreciate that stuff. It means a lot. We appreciate you guys. And Jay, always a pleasure, sir. Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and happy hunting, everybody.
Happy hunting.
We'll catch you next time. Same mic, same vibe, big laugh, big talks. Yeah, we're built different, all right. Thanks for watching. Now get back to work.